Welcome to Mystery Unknown Files, where hidden truths come to light and the shadows finally speak. Today's story takes us to the rugged outskirts of Deadwood, a place steeped in legends, whispers, and secrets no one dares to confront. For decades, locals have passed down rumors of vanished lawmen, stolen land, and strange disappearances that were quietly erased from history. Most people dismiss them as small-town ghost stories. But what happens when a curious teenager stumbles upon something that proves the rumors are real? Deep inside a forgotten cave, he finds a clue that not only unravels a mystery, but puts his own life in immediate danger. This is not just a tale of discovery, it's a story of courage, corruption, and the price of uncovering the truth. Stay with us, because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. On a sweltering afternoon in the outskirts of Deadwood, golden sunlight poured down over the dry, rugged hills. 17-year-old Malachi Brooks, a boy with an insatiable curiosity, stood at the entrance of an old cave, its mouth hidden beneath tangled brush and crumbling rocks. This wasn't his first time exploring the caves around town, but something about this one made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. A cool breath drifted out from within, carrying with it a faint metallic scent and a heavy silence that seemed to swallow every sound. The older folks in town often whispered about buried treasure and untold secrets, but no one had ever dared to venture too far inside. Malachi tightened his grip on the oil lamp in his hand, its small flame casting warped, shifting shadows across the damp cave walls. A thought flickered in his mind, perhaps this was the place that would change everything. But he didn't yet know that what awaited him inside wasn't treasure at all, but a deadly secret the entire town was determined to keep buried forever. Inside the cave, the faint glow from Malachi's oil lamp was just enough to push back a fraction of the darkness. He moved forward cautiously, each step echoing off the stone floor like an unspoken warning. The cold air made him shiver, but curiosity kept pulling him deeper. Then, the wavering light of his lamp fell upon something unusual, a dull glint of metal beneath a thick layer of dust. Malachi knelt down, brushing away dirt and scattered debris, revealing a tarnished silver badge. The engraving was still clear: Deputy U.S. Marshal, Thomas Fletcher. His heart began to pound. Fletcher was a name everyone in town knew, a federal officer who had mysteriously vanished months earlier. Beside the badge, the light caught something far more unsettling: a human skeleton. The skull was cracked with a deep indentation at the back. This was no natural death. Malachi staggered back, his breathing quickening, the realization sinking in that he had stumbled upon a secret someone had gone to great lengths to hide. Fragmented rumors rushed back to him, whispers of corruption, stolen land, and people who had disappeared after daring to speak out. Before he could gather his thoughts, a faint sound emerged from deeper within the cave, the heavy, deliberate rhythm of approaching footsteps. The oil lamp trembled in his grip, keeping time with his pounding heart. This was no random echo in the stone. Someone else was here, right now. And Malachi's instincts told him that whoever it was had no intention of letting him leave with the truth he had just uncovered. The moment Malachi stumbled out of the cave, clutching the tarnished badge and the weight of what he'd just seen, he felt it a presence. It was that primal, skin-crawling instinct that told you someone's eyes were locked on your back. The late afternoon sun was dipping behind the hills, casting long, jagged shadows across the dusty path. Every sound seemed sharper now: the crunch of gravel under his boots, the faint rustle of wind through dry grass, and then footsteps, heavy, deliberate, getting closer. He didn't dare look over his shoulder at first. Instead, he quickened his pace, heart hammering against his ribs. But the footsteps matched him, step for step, until curiosity and fear overpowered caution. Malachi glanced back and froze. A tall figure in a dark coat stood about 50 yards away, face obscured by the low sunday. Even from that distance, Malachi could feel the authority radiating off him. It wasn't just a stranger. This was someone who belonged here. Someone who knew exactly what Malachi had found. Panic surged through him. He bolted down the trail, lungs burning as the man's pace shifted into a purposeful walk, almost like he knew there was nowhere for Malachi to hide. The town's outskirts were still a good half-mile away, but there was one place he could go, an old tool shed behind the weathered house of Samuel Grant, the retired sheriff. Grant had been a family friend for years, one of the few people Malachi's father ever truly trusted. Malachi rounded the final bend, bursting into the backyard and slamming the shed door shut behind him. He crouched low, listening. The footsteps stopped just beyond the fence, then faded away, slow and confident, as if the pursuer wasn't giving up, just waiting for the right moment. Malachi knew one thing for certain. Whoever that man was, he held power in this town. And now, Malachi had something he was willing to kill for. Samuel Grant didn't waste time with pleasantries. The moment Malachi shut the shed door behind him, the old sheriff's eyes locked on the badge in his hand. Grant's weathered face went pale, his jaw tightening like a man seeing a ghost. He motioned for Malachi to sit, then pulled a dusty metal box from beneath a loose floorboard. Inside were yellowed photographs, official documents, and a revolver wrapped in oilcloth. "That badge belonged to Thomas Fletcher," Grant began, his voice low but steady. "He was my partner and my friend. 2 years ago, Fletcher was investigating a land grab orchestrated by William Carver, the wealthiest man in this county. Carver's men forced families off their land, burned homes, and silenced anyone who stood in the way. Fletcher got too close to the truth, and one night, he vanished. I knew Carver was behind it, but every piece of evidence I found disappeared before it could reach the courts." Malachi's pulse quickened as Grant spread the documents across the workbench. Among them was a map marked with red X's properties that had changed hands under suspicious circumstances. There were affidavits from witnesses, all unsigned, and a blurry photograph showing Fletcher standing with Carver at a construction site just weeks before his disappearance. Grant leaned in, his voice now a whisper. "The badge you found, it proves Fletcher was in that cave. But there's more. The wound on that skull you saw, that's no accident. I've seen it before. It's the same way Carver's enforcer kills." A chill ran down Malachi's spine. The pieces were falling into place. Carver's empire was built on blood and fear, and Fletcher had died trying to expose it. Now, Malachi held the one thing Carver couldn't afford anyone to find. Grant pressed a weathered hand on Malachi's shoulder. "You've got a choice, son. We can take this to the state investigators, but once we do, Carver will know you're involved, and he won't hesitate to come after you, just like he did with Fletcher." In that moment, Malachi realized the truth wasn't just dangerous, it was lethal, and the man who wanted it buried was still out there, watching. The night air outside the shed was heavy, the kind that seemed to carry every sound for miles. Malachi was still staring at the documents spread across Grant's workbench when the faint crunch of tires on gravel cut through the silence. Grant's head snapped up. Without a word, he reached over and blew out the single lantern, plunging them into darkness. Through the small crack in the warped wooden door, Malachi saw the glow of headlights sweep across the yard. A black SUV rolled to a slow stop by the fence. 2 men stepped out, both in dark jackets, moving with the precision of predators. One of them glanced toward the shed. "They know," Grant whispered. His voice was calm, but his hand gripped the revolver like it was part of him. "And they're not here to talk." Malachi's heartbeat pounded in his ears. They had seconds, maybe less, before the men reached the door. Grant pointed toward the back wall and the loose panel leading into the neighbor's overgrown field. "Go, now." Malachi hesitated, looking at the box of evidence. Leaving it behind felt like throwing away Fletcher's only chance at justice. But staying meant handing it straight to Carver's men. In the distance, a boot slammed against the front of the shed. The wood groaned. He grabbed the box, cradling it tight against his chest, and slipped through the panel into the cold night air. The weeds clawed at his legs as he crouched low, moving fast through the field. Behind him, the shed door burst open, and voices barked orders. Flashlight beams cut through the dark, sweeping dangerously close. Malachi didn't stop until he reached the tree line, lungs burning. He glanced back once, just in time to see one of the men step out into the yard, scanning the darkness with a slow, deliberate sweep. They hadn't caught him, not yet. But Malachi knew this wasn't over. Carver's men were close, too close, and now they knew exactly what he had in his hands. And they would keep coming, until either the truth was buried, or Malachi was. The town hall was packed, its air thick with tension. Malachi stood near the center of the room, every eye fixed on him. Across the aisle, Mayor Carver lounged in his seat, a practiced smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, as if the entire gathering was just another performance he controlled. The townspeople murmured, their voices low, unsure of what was about to unfold. Grant had managed to slip him inside, bypassing the deputies stationed at the doors. Malachi could still feel the weight of the box in his arms, the evidence inside almost pulsing with urgency. His palms were damp, but his voice, when it finally broke the silence, was steady. "These," he said, pulling out the photographs and contracts, "are copies of every transaction, every payoff, and every threat you've made to keep this town under your thumb." A ripple went through the crowd. Carver's smirk faltered for just a fraction of a second. He leaned forward, his voice booming. "Baseless lies from a reckless boy. Do you really think anyone here will believe you over me?" Malachi didn't answer. He simply held up the final piece, a recording device. With one click, the speakers filled with Carver's own voice, cold and calculated, detailing how Fletcher had been silenced. The words echoed through the hall, each sentence hammering another nail into the mayor's facade. Gasps erupted. People turned, whispering fiercely. Even the sheriff, long thought to be in Carver's pocket, stiffened and stepped toward the front. Carver's face drained of color as the room shifted no longer under his control. "You can threaten me," Malachi said, meeting his eyes, "but you can't threaten the truth." Grant stepped up beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It wasn't just them anymore. Every witness in that hall had heard the confession, had seen the proof. Carver's empire was crumbling in real time, the mask he'd worn for years shattering under the weight of his own words. For the first time, Malachi felt the tide turn. The fear that had chased him through the dark now belonged to the man who once seemed untouchable. And this time, there was no way out for him. The deputies closed in, their boots thudding against the wooden floor as the murmurs swelled into a roar. Carver tried to rise, but the sheriff's hand clamped firmly on his shoulder, pressing him back down. The same man who once enforced his will now read him his rights in a steady, unshakable voice. Gasps turned to cheers, and the people who had spent years in silence finally stood tall. Malachi stood still, almost unable to process that it was over. The evidence was already being collected, the mayor's signature power stripped from him like a mask torn away. Carver's eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally, but there were none left. Every whisper, every bowed head, every fearful glance from the past had vanished. Now, there was only defiance. As the sheriff led Carver away, the heavy doors swung open, letting in a rush of cold evening air. It carried with it the feeling of something clean, something new. Malachi exhaled, the knot in his chest finally loosening. Grant stepped beside him, and for the first time, they both smiled, not from victory alone, but from relief. The town had seen the truth. Justice had not just been served, it had been reclaimed. And in that moment, it was clear, courage doesn't mean living without fear. It means standing tall in spite of it, because the truth, once spoken, can't be silenced.